D.K. Fields, The Sticher and the Mute. Audio review by Natalia Elliot. Reviewing this book was a bit of a challenge. The author, D.K. Fields, is actually split into two people, Catherine Stansfield and David Towsey, who offer a unique blend of crime and fantasy writing. As a mix of the two, the focus was nice and balanced. At the start of the novel are a list of names. They are members of what is somewhat ominously referred to as the audience. Each member of the audience has a role, sometimes randomly, such as the penniless poet who is god of song, poetry, and money by nefarious means. Each member of the audience is associated with at least three things, quite a similar concept to Greek gods such as Zeus, god of lightning, or Demeter, goddess of agriculture and also marriage. The start is a tad confusing at first. Readers are not quite thrown into the deep end, but the terminology of the fantasy world is not laid out in an easy manner. Of course, if you've read the first book, Widow's Welcome, it might be a little more obvious, as this is the second in the series. I liked how it felt as though the reader was solving a mystery alongside Detective Cora Gordeheim, the protagonist. We solve the mystery behind the meanings of words, while she solves the mystery of who ordered the execution of her prisoner. Because of some unfamiliar terms, I found the first half of the novel a little slow and almost difficult to get through. Fields places an interesting mini-story within the novel though, something which I note is very explicit throughout. The fantasy is centred on the idea of storytelling. Different geographical regions compete and tell stories in an election. The winning region rules the rest. We are subject to one of these stories from the Polish people. It's a story of generational trauma, with one story ending acting as the beginning for the previous generation. While entertaining for some, it felt tiring to read a story which didn't have a clear ending in sight. Cora does not particularly comment on the story until the more developed stage of her investigation, which is not only a murder but a case of corruption. Someone in the highest circle has ordered the death of her prisoner, whose crimes were explained in Widow's Welcome. The story picks up after the first half as the detective starts to notice that the election times almost too perfectly with her investigation of murder. A personal highlight would have to be how the relationship is portrayed between Cora and her sidekick, Constable Jenkins. Cora is a 40-something, sarcastic, and experienced detective. Streetwise, she bends rules by having debts to gambling houses, smoking bindle leaf, which is not described as illegal but certainly dubious, and having close connections with poor children selling the penny sheets. Constable Jenkins is a classic and brilliant contrast. She is a younger woman, the daughter of a high-ranking commission official. Her bright and hopeful personality means she often misses Cora's sarcasm and seems to have a genuine passion for the commission. She is even physically taller than Cora, who seems to find Jenkins useful for her crowd-parting elbows. The pair work as a professional duo, which is why Jenkins cannot leave after Cora is let go by her corrupt chief inspector. An ideal middle book for a series. The details about the previous book are perfectly scattered, so there are no important moments missed. The backstory to Cora and Ruth's relationship is found in this book, but that context better explains Ruth's actions in the latter half of this book. Towards the end, a third motive is revealed, and so Fields has covered murder, corruption, and eventually environmentalism. This change in the environment sparks a domino effect which leads Cora right back to Finest, the capital of this fantasy world. In Finest lies the head of the government body, the Assembly. Quote, "There it was, the place Chief Inspector Cillian didn't want her poking her nose in. The Assembly building, where the chambers meet. No matter who won the election, there was always enough money for the potted cinder trees forced to grow into fancy shapes and flanking the grand entranceway. Money for the gardeners, whose job it was to bend those branches around wire. Money for the men and women who stood at the entrance night and day, for the batons tucked in their belts, ready to be pulled out to keep the unwanted from going in." End quote. Cora lightly touches on the idea of corruption here. It's a wonderful contrast to the stories of how the South is struggling, and in doing so, reveals more about her morals. The connection between Cora and Ruth is one which interrogates a deep family shame and secrecy, one which circles right back around to Cora's investigation. The familial ties in the novel are beautifully done, with the links just distant enough that they are unlikely to be predicted, even by the experienced crime novel fan.
New Welsh Review's multimedia programme is sponsored by Aberystwyth University.